Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Will here. Welcome back to the channel. All right, we're going to be going over a few different charts here. We had a monster day between yesterday and today with the information that came out on the status of the economy as far as CPI and inflation data. We had the details today on PPI, which pretty much put the market in a roller coaster, starting with a crazy dump that we had yesterday, which shook out a lot of folks, myself included, on a couple of plays. Calls that were supposed to be pretty much jumping up and down and jumping in the right direction for us. Wound up going the opposite direction and actually wound up losing a little bit on a few of those trades that we took early in the morning. CPI actually came in a lot better than expected, cooled off from 5.0 to at 5.0 from 5.2 that was expected. So that set markets into a rally early yesterday, and pretty much was a complete opposite reaction than we expected. Also, after PPI today, we have a huge rally that happened. Sent a lot of calls on some of the big market cap stocks upwards, as well as the S&P 500. So we'll take a look at the charts, go over a couple of different setups, and see what we have going on for the next days coming forward. All right, so let's jump right into it. All right, taking a look here, we got the SPY pulled up. SPY S&P 500. Pull up on a daily chart to get a broad view of where we are in the schematic. We all know that we are dealing with the descending broadening wedge off of the highs at 480 just about, and been on the downtrend ever since. Recently broke the downtrend a few weeks back, retested it in the more recent descending broadening wedge. We'll look at the 4 hour just to show you how that's planning out. Another descending broadening wedge, as well as a bull channel that's actually been in place since the bottom of the last, basically the last of the dump here, which is back at 349. We've on the uptrend since that time frame, broke out of the downtrend, retested in another deep descending broadening wedge, and have pretty much been on a tear ever since. We'll move over to the 1 hour time frame as well. We'll take another look. Formed another bullish channel that's been on since roughly about the 379 mark and has been pretty much respected ever since. I drew an additional white line here, which showed just a little bit of the outskirts of it, which we saw a huge negative reaction yesterday. I'll get a closer look in a little bit here. Negative reaction once we actually broke that line and fell out of it, causing us to drop down pretty substantially on the chart there, and costing us a lot on some of the calls that we've taken, especially after a bullish CPI event. We'll take a look a little bit closer. Let's go to the 15-minute chart and show you what we got going on here. All right, so this is basically yesterday's setup. CPI came in a lot cooler than expected, jumped up after getting the news early in the morning of the 5.2 expected versus the 5.0, which what we got. You can instantly see here, chart jumped up immediately. A lot of huge buying pressure that hopped up, boy, everything back up to about 413. And then from there, everything literally just compiled downwards, down towards the lows of yesterday, which was roughly about 408. So roughly a $5 swing on the S&P 500 all the way down before bouncing back up to about 411, and then dumping even further down all the way to after hours up to about close to 406, the 406 mark. We also, being that we had the details that came in after about 2 o'clock for the Fed minutes that took place, I expected myself personally to have a bounce based upon the details that might have come out, leading to anything that would have been alluding us to believe that there may be a potential pause, easing up due to the inflation seeming to stave off a little bit, but there was a complete opposite reaction. Bags started getting dumped and literally dropped us back down several few dollars, again down to that 406 mark. We well below my level here. My purple lines are pretty much my levels of support that I look for before reversals or bounces and so on and so forth, and it literally dropped us right down below it. Moving on into today, we got the good news that we had PPI that came in a lot cooler than expected, also showing us the trend that the inflation fears are pretty much cooling off. Everything that the Fed has been fearing, the economy's been fearing, is starting to show signs of weakness, and the market loved it. We rallied today. Some of the big caps and some of the big stocks that we had actually pushed up huge. We had a minor market squeeze, it looked like, after we regained that uptrend that I showed you a little while ago on that white line, regained it and almost got back into the bull channel that we had set up here. That green line that I showed you earlier on, just before double topping right at the 413 mark that we hit yesterday afternoon or yesterday morning after CPI information came out. Taking a little bit closer look here at the 15-minute time frame. You can see after the double top played out, we started in after hours, starting to retrace a little bit. I mean, this was a huge move from bottom to top on the SPY from 408 roughly to 413.8 at the high. If you were following me this today on Twitter, if you're following me on Twitter, if you're not, please get on there. I post a lot of the plays that I take. I try to pretty much let anyone know who's interested in following and taking the trade idea that I post. Again, doing your own due diligence. I'm not a financial advisor, never had financial advice at all, but I do post the plays that I'm in, and you make the decision if you're interested in buying or selling after you do your due diligence. But I want to take in this trade very early on the SPY on a couple of 0 DTEs as well as a longer out call for 421, looking at the 414 mark. Not expecting it to run the way it did, but glad I got into that play. Wound up being a huge winner on both ends. Roughly entered in around the 409 mark, roughly about 409 before running, after I noticed that we had re-entered this uptrend that I mentioned earlier on. So just before that, I noticed we tweezer topped here, dumped under, and then found support at this yellow line, which is the 410 mark that I've been watching for quite some time. And I noticed that we're back in. Once you slipped under it, I entered in my calls and pretty much rolled this thing all the way up while trimming at crucial areas along the way before topping out right at the 413 area. Uh, it was for the calls that I actually had on that were for 416, for 421, as well as some 0 DTEs at around the 409 mark. I entered in to 412 calls, which wound up going as much as 500% on those, as well as it would gone up to 500%, but I actually wound up accidentally cutting them a little early, roughly around the 320% mark. Mistakes happen. What are you going to do? But for the most part, I know that they ran up as much as 500% after doing the detailed research on it, what they could have been. Nonetheless, I still had my calls for 421, the 416, which ran up to roughly about 200 and some odd percent. Beautiful plays, leading me also to move into the other plays that I had that were as well as Amazon, Apple, huge winners as well after the Amazon news that dropped about them going into the AI space. And we'll take a look at their chart as well to see what that's looking like for continuation. But as far as the SPY is concerned, I can see this trade retracing slightly. I have my levels here for retracement roughly around 412 before hooking back around and then pushing one more time. I can see this continuing on for the next couple of days. We'll go ahead and take a look at the volume analysis to see how things are looking there, see what some of the indicators look like, and then chop it up. Okay, taking a look here, I went ahead and pulled up a couple of indicators that I usually like to look at in situations like this. We're going to take a look at a closer time frame, roughly around the 5 minute, just to get an idea of where we left off. Went ahead and pulled up also my Elliott wave analysis tool, just to get an idea of where we stopped off on the 5 minute chart, and also remove the after hours, going to just the regular trading hours to get an idea of what the next move can look like. Elliott wave shows we had a 1, 2, expansive wave 3, 4 for a retracement, roughly to about the low 13 mark, with a wave 5 that should be on its way shortly. Wave 5 is not as long as the wave 3. However, it can still push us, which we have a target at the 618 Fibonacci line, which is roughly around 418. I don't think we'll go at that high. I have a line set here that I have a historic support or slash resistance level here at 416.88. I do feel like that's where we're going to hit next within the next couple of days, next few trading days. So I'm going to keep a lookout for that. As far as the volume profile is concerned, you can see that we have that air pocket that we just literally ran right through because of the quote unquote short covering rally that we had today. That air pocket, gave us no resistance after we got the information on the PPI data. Ran all the way through. You can see where we ran into a little bit of resistance here at the 413 mark, which is basically where the BVR sits. And now we're pretty much consolidating here, looking for the next push. Moving a little closer, you can actually also even see we have set up one of the more recent patterns that I like to put together. I'm going to go to the 3 minute chart here just so we can show you here. It is the broadening top pattern. which we've talked about a few times on this channel. It is kind of consolidating here, just kind of waving back and forth, giving us an idea that we of indecision. But I can see we have the ABCDE pattern, this being A, B, C, D on the bottom end, and pattern in the fifth E should push us up and above to 414. I'd say so the next trading day, most likely by Friday, we'd be looking at 414. Hopefully find some consolidation up there. 414, also to remind you, that is as well going to be a midline of the larger channel, which should give us a nice little boost towards the 420, 421 mark in the next couple of weeks. I don't see us being too hindered at that point if we can go ahead and break back into that level. Reason being is that there is an upside gap fill sitting at around 420 and 421. That was created back a while ago. I'll tell you when. That actually was roughly around August 22nd of last year, and it hasn't been filled since then. So we're most likely going to head toward that way to fill that gap before possibly filling it and dropping back downwards, because we have a lot of gaps that we left on the way up here. Or we can continue to push forward towards the 430 mark, which I've been calling for now for the longest period of time. You can see I still have it marked here as 429.92, which is one of the highs that we made during our last runs back here in August, also 2022. So we'll keep a lookout on the SPY. Some opportunities here still to go. Again, I entered into 421 calls for the SPY, roughly around the 416 mark. Still opportunity to get into those if the opportunity presents itself tomorrow. We'll take a look to see if things retrace down to good levels. We can start trickling in and take it from there. Okay, taking a look here at Amazon on the 1 hour time frame with extended hours on. You can see that Amazon has been in a little bit of a downtrend in the last couple of days, pretty much since the beginning of April. Uh, Playing the downside, up and downside here. I've been in a couple different plays throughout the month on Amazon, but it has been a downtrend ever since roughly about April 3rd when this has all started. It was been in a distributive pattern here. You can see it's just on its way back down, but basically playing on both ends. There was a huge dump, obviously, on the 5th, and it found support, continued back up, and it's kind of been waving back and forth up until recently with that news that we got with the gap up, as well as in combination with the CPI and PPI data today. Dumped all the way down on CPI and then rocketed back up today on the PPI information, on top of the idea for the Chat GPT competitor. So this flag has played out, has now been broken. My purple lines, like I mentioned before, are my huge areas of support and resistance that I look at on the charts. And I noticed that we were basically just cutting through these things like butter. Again, I mentioned I entered my calls roughly around the $99 mark, rode this thing all the way up before finding out later that the squeeze was in place because of the Chat GPT competitor. And things just literally took off, taking the market up with it. As far as what I can see on this thing, the continuation, I did have my call set up there for the 21st of April. As far as continuation, I'm going to take a look at a couple different levels that may be coming up if you're interested in getting into some of those positions on the next coming day or two. I typically don't hold a lot of my positions for long unless they're runners and they're very deep in the money. But again, if you'd like to take into account possible entry, we'll take a look at some levels that I can see for possibly happening on Amazon, and see what we got here on some of my indicators. All right, we got here on my 1 hour chart. I'm going to show you some of we can look at the increase in volume coming up. Increase in volume for the last on the 1 hour session. You see that we have been picking up slowly on the volume, and we have been increasing on the uptrend. And obviously today was huge, pushed us back through all some of my harmonic levels that I have here off of a shark pattern. The shark pattern actually shows up the increase here, actually moving up. I expect us to come back to retrace here to about the 101.74 after the squeeze move. You can see on the volume profile that we hit the top here on the BPVR, and we got one of our signals to drop that we'd be dropping back down. There is some resistance at this 102.38. I expect 107.4. If we find support here, again, my purple line is also marked in that same area, 101.74, 101.75, somewhere in that mark. If we find support there, I'd look to be entering more calls at that particular point. If it consolidates and shows bounce potential, that'll just be considered a reaccumulation pattern, and most likely would hit that next target at 103 within the next couple of days. So keep a lookout for Amazon. Huge mover. Obviously, I expect this to continue as long as the market doesn't, reverse completely. I think we should be good to go. So Amazon is a big one to look out for. All right, next up here we got Apple. Apple was also another big mover for today. Wound up actually picking a few calls up on that particular ticker. All right, next big mover that we actually picked up today was Apple. Apple had some beautiful movement today. We actually wound up getting some calls this morning. Also, after the the PPI information came through, and we just knew that this one was going to be a big mover. Went ahead and picked up some calls here for 165, also for the 421 date. Give us a little bit of time, being that we just didn't know we were going to rock it this much. So 165 calls are in place. We actually wound up playing off of the EMAs and SMA crossovers that I like to have in place. I use the 921 cross, the 1348 cross, the 200 EMA, and the 800 EMA, as well as keeping in place the 50 and 200 moving averages, simple moving averages. And notice that we had the gap down, obviously, yesterday, moving back down, caught support roughly in this channel, also on top of VPVR on the volume. Notice that the volume started to steadily increase yesterday, picked up the calls this morning, roughly around the 161 mark, and rode those things all the way through. And the rest is history. I had my major levels of resistance here at the 162 as well as 163 mark. Notice that this thing wasn't stopping, so just kept on running with it. Huge move, also about 100% move on returns on that particular play too. You can see that we're topping out here roughly again around the VPVR mark, and I expect a little bit of retracement, but we are still finding some major support here on the 9 EMA, which is again a huge indication that there can be some continuation in the market. Apple is hugely weighted in the market, so if Apple's moving, a lot of things are moving with it. So we'll keep a lookout on this thing for Apple. If there is going to be a little bit of retracement, I can expect it to happen on a shorter term before a bounce. Right now, we did actually break. I'm looking at the 5-minute chart now. We did break back below the 9 EMA, so I can see some possible retracement down to about the 13 EMA, roughly about 164 or mid 164s before things start to reverse, or hopefully reverse. But that's pretty high volume, obviously, because look at the end of the day, volume picked up steadily and actually had an additional pop, which pushed us over this midline and wound up helping us finish the day over at 165. 56 and down only a little bit at minus 0.36 in the after hours session. This thing does have legs to continue to run. All right, taking a look at my indicators, as far as continuation is concerned, it's going to be a little bit tough to call. It's going to look at some of the further out time frames to see if there's any additional support that we can see. A lot of my indicators are actually showing that this may be the top on this one. No Sure Thing is still got some time. The No Sure Thing or KST indicator looks like it's got some time. But I am flashing some sell indications. Max momentum looks like it's ready to curl over and come back to the downside. Again, it won't go too far down. I can still see a possible bounce somewhere around the 164.5 range, 160-ish, right back to about VPVR, as you can see, which is about 160, 164.72. So high possibility we come back down there before bouncing, consolidating. That also, again, lines up with the 13 EMA. Should bounce and consolidate around there, hopefully, and then look to re-enter, because I do think there's going to be some continuation at some point. But this move was huge today, so it's got to be a cool off point before things turn around, and obviously run to continue this movement that we have on the entire market. So Apple's another one to keep a lookout for. If Apple's moving, the entire market's moving, and this one is a big one if you'd like to get into it. All right, we're going to take a look at AMC, ticker symbol AMC. Get an idea of what's happening with this one here. Now, AMC is a pretty interesting one. We know that we have all the details coming up as far as the reverse split happening. Good information that we got on the credit card release yesterday, and things like that. We're expecting some more motion from this thing, but obviously it's being held back for various reasons, whether or not it's arbitrage, whether or not it's the idea for the reverse split coming up. Also, the I guess the play out of the lawsuit that's still in place. It's not a complete, it's not a completion on it as of yet. So there's still things that are up in the air, and they're using that to their advantage to keep this thing under wraps. I mean, the entire market's pushing. We did get a nice little movement today, up slightly before coming back down. We are up about 2.25% on the day and about 0.55% after hours at this point. But yeah, you can basically take a look and see this thing has been in a on a tear for the last few days, ever since the reversal news on the Allegheny lawsuit, running about 45 or 46% before coming back down. On the shorter time frame, roughly about the 30-minute here, we can see that we have a head and shoulders that's been playing out. I posted again on this about this on Twitter, noticing that this is coming downwards, and most likely a head and shoulders usually means we're going to come back to a level of support. I expect us to hit somewhere around the 513 to 516 level. I was mentioning this to someone on Twitter. I can't remember the exact name. I apologize if you're watching this video, but the this does start to appear like a parabolic arc. In this particular case, usually what happens was with a parabolic arc, it runs up very hard, it starts to curl off, and then usually will bounce off the last level of major support for a reversal. So I am expecting that to be the place where things start to turn around, which is roughly again about that 516 mark. If this happens, I can see it gaining enough strength and gaining enough liquidity for it to run and break through this 576 level, which has been what has been keeping us back for the last few days. And we can start to move from there. If that winds up being the case, I can see the next levels roughly around 630 and beyond. Right now, we'll take a look in a little bit here to see what the major levels of resistance are. With AMC, you have to look at it in a couple different ways because it is, again, manipulated, is controlled. So there are a lot of things that they do to try to throw us off for our technical analysis. So, take it easy on guys that are trying to do this stuff and try to figure out and pinpoint all of this, because it is very, very difficult to map and chart AMC because of all the manipulation that's behind it. But we'll take a look here real quick at the larger time frames to get an idea of exactly where we are and what the outcome could be if we do cross the major levels. All right, so I went ahead and put up the daily chart, and like I mentioned before, with this particular stock, you got to look at it in a few different ways. The way they have it set up is that the way I've noticed that it's set up anyways, is that they actually play off two different types of scales. I noticed that it's played off the linear chart as well as another factor and a logarithmic scale. All right, so in this particular case, the downtrend, we're talking about the downtrend, the breakout area, the major downtrend here from the last 2 years. And I have it set up in a couple different locations because of that, because of the difference in the type of chart that's being used. I have it set up here on the descending broadening wedge and log scale. All right, so let's go ahead and put log scale on, which is actually showing. Descending broadening wedge shows roughly about the breakout area would be somewhere around 699. All right, so 699 would be the breakout area on log scale, and that would be again roughly about $7. We call that $7 would be the breakout area. That's where we're most likely we'd break through and start to go pretty quickly up toward the top of the descending of the broadening wedge pattern that we've had here, or the broadening top pattern. Again, the ABCDE, which would put us somewhere around this level, that midline somewhere around the high 10s, 1088, low 10s before we start to see a little chop. Most likely at the most would put us somewhere around the $12 mark. Now, that's what I'm seeing here. Now, is that 100% possible? It depends. We have this buy and also the broader market to be concerned with if things can actually hold up and play out before we go ahead and touch the 420, 430 mark on the SPY. If things start to barrel down on the broader market, it's most likely going to take AMC along with it. Regardless of what's going on, regardless of our catalyst, it's going to be slowed down to a degree, and which I expect them to do. This is kind of normal the way they operate in the last few months, years, whatever the case it may be. But we can take a look and see based on the chart if things do go that way. The $7 mark on the descending broadening wedge in log scale will show up about $7 being the breakout point. So right about here. Now the orange line that I've actually had, orange dotted line I have here is actually going to be the same line, the breakout line. Now this is going to be in linear. And linear, that actually shows to be a lot closer than the $7 market as mentioned a little while ago. It looks like we're right there, roughly around the $5.95 area. So I think that's the reason that they're actually holding it back. I think that line needs to be more respected than what we're probably giving it, and we're being held down so we don't cross that and create a new volatility event where this thing shoots up faster than what they expect. So they're holding it in this area for it to not go crazy beforehand. So taking a look here again, let's move into a closer time frame. Let's go to the 15-minute and get a closer look. 15-minute regular trading hours. There's the downtrend, that same orange dotted line. I got it here. You can see we're starting to move up a little bit in after hours, it seems. But I don't expect this to fully continue until it hits a sell-off at some point. But if it does continue to go, that downtrend line, let's say tomorrow being Friday, let's see here. I can see, let's go a little closer. Tomorrow, Friday, that line gets lower and lower every single day. So tomorrow, Friday, would put the breakout line by close of day, the breakout line would be around 580. So it breaks 580, things can get pretty crazy. I'm starting to imagine that they're actually holding this back until the end of the week. Usually, in past runs, we've had shorter weeks and things like that. A lot of different things are happening with the short interest. A lot of different things are happening with the return shares. I noticed that there are a lot of return shares happening. I noticed in the cost to borrow drop, which is usually a nice indication that the upside is coming. Obviously, they get a little afraid to short, so they stop shorting, and that cost to borrow comes down. It leads me to believe that we possibly can see a move very, very soon. Just depends on how long it takes. So, for our sake of our contracts, only thing in my portfolio that right now is red. So, hopefully this thing turns around as soon as possible before I have to cut those calls. The ones I'm actually in right now are for beyond the OPEX date, have at 428, just to, again, hold those as a trade. Again, I'm not exactly sure what can happen with those by the time the actual split takes place. So I hope to sell those off a little before that. So let's keep a look at AMC. Obviously, there's a big catalyst coming up. So let's keep an eye on that as well. All right, guys. So that's pretty much it, the wrap for what happened today in the markets. Exciting day, huge wins, huge opportunities. See continuation happening on a lot of these stocks. Remember, follow me on Twitter. Keep an eye on what we got going on there. I post a lot of my plays there, so you can go ahead and follow along. Make sure that you like and subscribe to the video if you like any kind of the content I'm putting out. If it helps you in any way, please follow and share the content because it goes a long way for us and helps out the channel tremendously. Once again, this is Will. Looking forward to see you guys next time on the next video.